Welcome, it's Jeremy Allen Gould. I'm coming to you today to confirm between God and of man that in fact the rumors that you have all heard are definitely true. I started this podcast because I freaking love music. I was privileged enough to book amazing artists and bands in the past, and I was lucky enough to stay in touch with many of them to this day. This is a place to hear their stories. Thank you so much for riding along on this journey, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. With that said, the rumors are definitely true. Thank you for tuning in to this latest episode of the Rumors Are True podcast. My name is Jeremy, and today I welcome the band Riot for Romance. Riot for Romance is an indie band based out of Atlanta, St. Pete, and Denver. Jason, Kelly, and Brett are an incredible band that I discovered a year or so ago when I booked Mr. ENC and Riot. So awesome conversation with this upcoming band. I know a lot of these guys have been in some previous bands you might recognize. So I hope you enjoy this latest episode with Riot for Romance. Brett, Jason, and Kelly, Riot for Romance, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, guys. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Thank you. We planned that, actually.
Yes, you guys obviously are reading the script well. I like that. No, I'm just kidding. Tell me, what are you guys up to currently? What's going on in your worlds?
I guess I'll jump in. Wow, today I've got 2 kids who are crazy, 10 and 7, and a wife, and been working the corporate gig for a lot of years in communications, and just recently started to do a nice little side hustle with Bright here called Sonic Spotlights from a marketing campaign brand standpoint.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's just keeping us busy and helping to further the artist community that we love.
Yeah, you're in Denver, right?
Yeah.
What area of Denver?
Technically it's Westminster Thornton. So I'm in between Boulder and
Denver. Boulder rules.
It's perfect.
Yeah, I used to live off Florida and Federal and then forever ago. But I mean, I was only there for like a year. But I saw some amazing shows out there.
Denver's really thriving with music. It has for a long time.
Absolutely. Brett, tell me what you got going on.
I'm in the Atlanta area. I've been there, for about 16 years now, which I thought I would never live that far south of the Mason-Dixon line. But I kind of migrated there, did a stint in Nashville for a bit, which, I guess we might get into musically later, but wound up in Atlanta and went to go to school at 30. I just kind of decided I wanted to redo everything. Went to school for graphic design at the Savannah College of Art and Design at their campus in Atlanta. And then just recently, within the last year, bought a house in Atlanta. So I guess I'm going to be there for a bit, but I love it. It's great. So I'm kind of doing a lot of freelance graphic design, a little bit of fine art on the side. I've got kind of a cool gallery opportunity coming up and kind of hanging out there with my dog and some friends. And aside from Riot for Romance, kind of here and there collaborating with other friends on music when I can. Like I kind of put music away for a bit, so it's kind of really nice to be able to pick it back up, and especially as far as like the three of us seem to have taken it. So yeah, really stoked on that.
That's awesome. What area of Atlanta are you in?
I'm in an area called Adams Park, which is, if you're kind of familiar with the whole Atlanta Beltline project, on the kind of the southwest corridor of that. Really good neighborhood. I used to live pretty central in the city, but it's kind of cool just exploring all the reaches of Atlanta.
Yeah.
Great city, a lot of great diverse influences.
Yeah.
Really love it. Yeah.
I love Atlanta. I go up there I'll have to hit you up next time I go up there. I always say that, but
Yeah,
there's
please
like,
do.
I literally go up there and I go to work and then I'm like, I gotta go home. So it's like,
Yeah.
I like Atlanta, but it's just a lot, traffic wise and stuff. So
It's the worst.
yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, great area, great town. Just, I like the big city feel. I just, after a couple days, I'm like, all right, it's time to shut it down. But, anyway, Kelly, tell me what's going on in your world, man.
Typical dad life. I've got 3 kids. I've got a 22-year-old, a a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
Wow.
So big span of difference. So you guys are seeing here. We're here in my studio in St. Petersburg. So I work in the studio a lot, do a lot of production for different things, whether it be podcasting or band stuff. And so yeah, just trying to enjoy life in those kind of sense. I've been in Florida off and on for like 25 years. So I really know much anything else. I'm a transplant to Florida, but I can consider a Floridian. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool, man. I love that. I love that area. St. Pete's a great area.
Yeah, man, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, absolutely. I like going down there. I'm a big cigar guy, so I love going to Ybor City area, Tampa, and then going over across the bridge, and it's awesome. That's really, really cool, man. Awesome. So let's talk about growing up for you guys, and we'll go individually like we've been doing. So kind of bring me through maybe some bands, some records, some artists that kind of influenced you, kind of put you on the path, which it sounds like has influenced your life in a lot of different ways, at a young age that you probably didn't realize at the time, but now, it's kind of making more sense. So maybe bring me through that, and then let's go into some of the bands and artists and projects that you've played on over the years as well.
I guess we'll stick with the same order. I can jump in. For me, my family was always in love with music. I had a little Music Man suitcase record player at a young age, and my parents had given me a bunch of 45s that I would just spin nonstop. So like Hall & Oates, Maneater, I remember that. I just saw them live a few years ago. Just killer. And then, Michael Jackson Thriller, first cassette. And then jump in later on, my aunt, when I was 11 years old, introduced me to Hell with the Devil Striper.
Oh, hell yes.
Oh, my God. It just changed.
Speaking of.
Right? It changed my trajectory. Really dove into, there was a Christian bookstore within walking distance from where I lived, and I would go hang out there, and there was a guy, it is common, right? Probably a lot of our stories are similar, where there was a Christian bookstore and some punk-ass kid was the one running the music, and he would always, or she would have like the cool stuff off to the side, and that's how I got introduced to a lot of great bands. And I think for me, a lot of the typical U2, The Cure, I have a pretty broad taste, Metallica, you name it, but I really got into the Christian music scene around the Tooth and Nail era and even before. And I remember, for me, I think what really changed things for me is I had an opportunity at Cornerstone one year to be introduced and become friends with Gyro and Jerome.
Oh, wow.
Mortal. So cool. And really got sucked into that world. And actually, while I was kind of, romancing the idea of being a musician at the time, I think the coolest story is there was a show with Mortal. I think it was in Chicago areas where I grew up.
Elgin, maybe?
Yeah, it was in Elgin. I think it was Edan Production.
Oh, yeah. I remember those.
Yeah. And Mortal played, and I was unaware of this, but in the middle of their set, they like called me up to sing with them and do
Whoa.
vocals. And I was shocked. I was 16, I think. I was not ready for it. But I went up there. But I was like, you know that moment, Jeremy, where have you ever been like shocked with something, where you see those game shows where someone's like, oh, me?
Yeah.
That was it. My friends were like, they're talking about you.
Yeah.
Like me?
Yeah. No, I get it.
So that started a really awesome relationship with those guys. And I mean, just went on. I think probably, moving forward, just being a part of being a part of that, like, 1 degree of separation from a lot of bands and artists really influenced my trajectory in music. And then, later on, bands like Hum and Low Dive, stuff like that, to round it out.
I
guess I'll stop there. I could go on for hours.
No, I'm going to ask you while we're here, at least.
Yeah.
And I figure we could just do this with each of you. But, like, obviously it inspired you musically. Did you pick up an instrument after hearing these bands? And kind of what bands did you... you mentioned, obviously, having a moment with Gyro and Jerome. But what bands were you in at that time? Was there any early bands, I guess I should ask, in that time frame?
Yeah, sure. Actually, you asked the question, did that maybe inspire me to pick up an instrument? Let me take one step back. So in junior high, I had a youth group. It was small, and the youth group leader, one of the leaders, she was a musician, a singer, and she was Code of Ethics. She knew them.
He's from here. Barry's a buddy of mine. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, she knew them well and would sometimes perform with them. That turned into a thing where, like, hip-hop, DC Talk, Dynamic Twins, SFC, these hip-hop artists in the Christian community started. Remember that?
Yeah. Soldiers for Christ.
If you're listening to this, Soup, it's good news.
Yeah. I just saw him on a podcast recently, actually. Soup, the chemist.
That's the record that had the triple cheese.
Yeah, man. Oh, my God, I loved it. And I was into hip-hop. There's so many similarities, truly, from hip hop, like Tribe Called Quest, to like, whatever, into punk rock. There's a lot of aesthetics that are similar, right? And rhythmically and whatnot. So, I loved that, and I didn't have an instrument, so I actually rapped. And I'm going to tell you an embarrassing but true little nugget here, dude. I performed once with her, opening for Dynamic Twins.
What?
My MC, and I was like 14 or something like that. My MC name legit was Eminem. I'm not kidding.
Hysterical.
But an M and M, like the candy.
Yeah.
Remember why? It's super embarrassing.
That's amazing that you opened for Dynamic Twins.
Yeah, that was actually my first like stab at performing. But then later on, jumping back to Mortal and these kind of artists, I picked up around the same age. I was into the Crucified, right? Like huge. Yeah. So I picked up a guitar. I did 6 weeks of lessons. I hated it because at the time it was like, we're going to learn every theory and every stupid thing. And so I said, screw this. And I kept trying to write speed metal, maybe like Deliverance or something like that. But I wasn't talented enough, and it kept coming out like grunge or punk rock. And then I think that's what really threw me in that trajectory. So I was in a little band called Fishnet, which was a bit rapcore.
Yes.
I think we performed at a generator stage at Cornerstone that we...
Oh, yeah. That's a rite of passage right there.
Yeah, man. And then later on, I got into a band with Brett because he's from Chicago originally, too. So I think I'll stop there because then we actually started doing stuff with music at that time. But, it was nice to get my toes dipped in. And really, the Christian community allowed that opportunity because you could be present in a small pond, right? And totally. With people who... were passionate about music.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally understand and get where you're coming from. That's really cool. And I'm still fascinated you opened for Dynamic Twins.
I almost forgot that I did, bro. I actually still have a friend who was at that show, and we became friends. And to this day, every few years we connect on Facebook, and he's been a part of my life at a distance, but musically just through different iterations of music.
That's awesome.
It was really cool. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Brett, let's talk about you. Bands, records, shows that kind of molded who you are, and then maybe some of the bands that you wound up playing with after the fact.
Yeah. For sure. I think kind of similar to Jason, my dad was a huge music lover. He had an amazing collection of vinyl records, which, I didn't kind of understand at first. It was the thing that he would kind of yell at me to stop running past because the record would skip.
I do that with my kids now.
So one day it's kind of funny, like one day I just got really curious, and, finally one day I decided to stop and like listen to what he was listening to. And then I would kind of open up this cabinet where he had these records displayed, and I would start looking at these records. And I always like to say that kind of like started me on my journey, like my life's purpose, because I knew that I either wanted to make this music or I wanted to make this incredible art that was holding the music. And it's kind of awesome that I'm doing both. So I guess, booyah achieved in that respect.
Booyah. Now that
do the kids even say that anymore?
Well, I think I threw a curveball with Dynamic Twins and Eminem.
Yeah, see, it's all downhill from here, Jeremy. So that kind of got me curious on that, kind of headed on that path. And then I distinctly remember one birthday, my dad bought me both a Hall & Oates cassette and a Billy Ocean cassette.
Yes.
Like, here we go. But in terms of where I am today musically, something that I think really impacted me that like keeps paying dividends, and I don't think I immediately realized how much of an impact this record would have on me. But one day, junior high, Jason and I think had known each other by this point. One day my mom brought home The Cure's Disintegration.
It's just burned in my memory, dude.
Monumental.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. She bought it because the single off that record was Love Song, and she was like, hey, I bought this tape. Like, I like the song, but like I don't really like the rest of it. Like, why don't you listen to it? And I was like, sure. And like I said, it wasn't necessarily immediate, but I was definitely drawn in, and I definitely like held on to that cassette. And so kind of The Cure was always kind of back there. And then kind of like Jason mentioned, we kind of got into, I think we kind of discovered like punk rock and metal and like stuff like that around the same time. So I've definitely had a Striper phase, I don't always like to admit that, but it's okay.
No, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, but I mean, it was there, and I love them. And I remember at one point I used to like pray to God, like, please let me see Striper live one day, and now I could give a crap.
I hope you're not listening, Michael.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. But I mean, I like that. And then at the same time, my mom had remarried, and he was introducing me to things like Pink Floyd, Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Like Appetite. I remember sneaking the tape for Appetite for Destruction onto the bus for a track meet at school. I don't know why I felt like I had to sneak it on the bus, but I just,
because there were boobies on the cover.
That's right, on the inside cover.
Yeah.
But anyways, like that was kind of like ruling my world. So definitely kind of went down this like metal hardcore kind of route. And then as I got into high school, like Jason and I were discovering things, but we also I remember we had a couple of friends who like their older brothers were in bands that like were kind of cool. I remember this one band, I don't know why this sticks out, but Jacob Casanova, his older brother, was in a band called Sad Fish. And I remember my first job in high school was McDonald's, and I ended up working with the guitar player or the bass player in this band, Sad Fish, and he was actually a big like metalhead, and he introduced me to bands like a band called Cynic, which like, I don't know about that band, but that band is just like still to this day like mind blowing, that kind of like fused jazz and metal in a really unique, creative way. And I think that kind of started me on this tendency towards a little bit things that are, I don't want to say outsider music, but kind of like not your more like
mainstream
things. Yeah, exactly. So I think I remember kind of getting into that. And then, like I said, like I would kind of keep coming back to this Cure record. And I remember after I quit McDonald's, thank God, I remember working at Best Buy, having this awesome job at Best Buy where I didn't work in the music department, but I worked in the shipping department, and I got to check in all the music. So I would get to see all these like crazy weird CDs coming in. So this is kind of a quick 2-part story. I remember one time, like sometimes before the store would open, we would just like, one of us would pick a record and just like blast it from the home audio section. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to throw on this Cure record. And to just listen to that record start to finish at such a loud volume that filled the whole store.
Wow.
I just remember just kind of being like, this record is, pardon my French, fucking perfect.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, another guy I worked with in shipping, I remember the CD came in the back, and he got like really excited, and I was like, what? And it was this green CD. He's like, oh, you never heard of this band called Hum? I was like, Hum? And he played me that, and I think Sunny Day Real Estate Diary are on the same time, and it was just like mind blowing. You know, just kind of like holy crap. And then later, the same guy played me My Bloody Valentine's Loveless.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, the first track, Only Shallow, was like, that riff was just like, you know, there's that meme going around lately, like, the beats that make you make that, like, face or whatever. And it's like, Only Shallow, like, that riff is just like like, the mean guy, like, tough guy face or whatever. The rest of the record, I think, kind of took a while to, like, sink in. But that's, like, another record kind of like The Cure, where it's like, the more I revisited it, I just kept discovering new things. So that kind of put me, I think, on a musical journey at that point. And then in terms of playing music, I remember when Jason started that band Fishnet, kind of being envious that like I wasn't in a band with my best friend. So I kind of like stumbled my way into bass. And not because it was like I was a frustrated guitar player or I didn't, wasn't good enough. I just always gravitated towards bass. Yeah. I think like my dad, like one of his favorite bands was The Who, so like listening to like John Entwistle and like John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin was really cool. Yeah. And then, of course, like one of my big heroes is Simon Gallup from The Cure. This guy's tapping his watch at me. I tend to be a little bit more long-winded.
You're fine. You're fine, guys. You're fine.
I'm gonna try to wrap it up, but I think those were like foundational things, like those bass players, and then getting into punk hardcore and like kind of shoegaze and different things, and there's so many different approaches to bass, and I think that was why I loved it, because it it's kind of like it's either one of those things where like if it's gone you don't feel it, or it's one of those things that like through people like Simon Gallup, bass players like that, you learn like the bass could also be melodic and kind of take the lead.
Absolutely.
Sometimes. And I think that like really interested me in the instrument.
That's cool. I love that. I mean, I like a lot of those bands as well. I totally can relate, to the first time hearing My Bloody Valentine and just being like, what the hell? But like, in a good way. Like,
exactly.
Awesome. Kelly, tell me, growing up for you, bands, records, influences, and of course some of the bands that you wound up playing with.
Sure. My musical journey's kind of started really young. Both my mom and my grandfather were in like Southern gospel groups in church growing up. So I remember 4 or 5 years old in my grandfather's van going to weekend revival things for where they're singing and doing stuff. So like I've always been around music. And then it started probably around 4th grade. I grabbed my mom's clarinet, went into the classical music realm for about 2 years, started learning that. And then when I went into 6th grade is kind of right when I started like exploring rock. I mean, my parents were pretty sheltered, so they didn't, I remember growing up finding my dad's hidden cassette box that had like, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Ozzy, all these things. All being like, you can't listen to anything in there. That's not the music we want you to be listening to.
It's code for, now I got to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'd always like, sneak in the tape when they weren't at home to be able to listen to it, start to see these first remnants of it. And, I still remember listening to Back in Black or Highway to Hell. And you're like, ooh, oh, Mom and Dad told me I should be listening to this, So it's kind of funny, and then here in Tampa specifically, we had a music revival in the 90s that you started to see. We had a venue here called The Refuge.
Oh, yeah, I went there. I went there a couple of days ago.
So, they started doing shows. So my brother was the first one that actually was involved with that. And he comes home and he's like, hey, because I had just started playing drums about a year into that. And, obviously, Stryper was probably my first real intro to quote unquote Christian rock or anything like that. And then my brother starts bringing home like Vengeance Rising, Tourniquet, some of the real and I still remember my parents being like, "What did you say this is? Are you sure this is Christian?" And I'm like, "Mom, they sold it at the Christian bookstore. I promise."
I love
she's
that.
like, trying to figure out all this stuff, and so. My brother makes friends with some of the people at the refuge and then start going to some of these shows. And I'd never really, I still remember probably the first show that I really went to that I was like, oh, I saw POD. My brother's band was playing with them. And it was the first time or the first tour that they had been on here. And, so they come down to St. Pete and play at the refuge. And, my brother's like, oh, you got to come, check out this band called Strong Arm. It's like a melodic hardcore band. And I'm like, I have no idea what any of these bands are. I just know who Stryper is, Tourniquet, So he starts diving into the early stages of Tooth and Nail. And then you start to see them coming and playing because, the Refuge has now put a pretty good staple for some of those bands. And, touring bands, there's not a lot of places to play. So we started seeing, I still remember seeing Blink-182 before Travis was in the band. And then there was, 50 to 75 kids in a room. No one even knew who they were, So I really started opening up to those type of things. Mortal was also another early influence that I really enjoyed. Getting involved with. Like, my musical journey starts in, everything from classical all the way up to, I've played almost every style of music you can think of. That's just cool. Because I'm a music lover. Yeah. So whenever I'd find something that I enjoyed, I'd find the element to be able to go play in and have that, that versatility. And that's actually what actually helped me in all the bands that I started doing. Because I said, we signed it when I was in high school. So now the Riverside did to Take Hold. Yeah. And then a bunch of bands from that aspect kind of spawned out. Obviously, you have Chalice, which my brother was in.
I love Chalice, man.
Yep. Yeti and those kind of
Yeti, yes.
Yep. So, we were right out of high school getting signed to these labels. And then my ex-girlfriend at the time, her twin brother was the one that actually started Underoath. So we started, having all these connections of all these different bands playing. And then when one band would either break up or we would do something different, that I'd get a phone call from another band, hey, we need a guitar player, hey, can you, play for us? And so, it just opened up a lot of doors in that sense. So I'm probably the band slut of all of these guys. It was just, you is a hoe. I was a hoe. When it came to band stuff, it was just like, well, hey, they're in need of something, so let's just play. Totally. So I, was able to kind of just take advantage of some of the opportunities that started coming my way, and I never said no. If there was an opportunity, when I did my audition for Further, they called me on like a Monday. I had to learn, I think the first record going into the second record with, and had to learn it within like 4 or 5 days. So having to go all the way to Miami and start doing all the rehearsals and stuff like that. And I just dive in, especially if there's, if I'm really interested. I was a huge fan of Further, huge fan of Strong Arm. So, when those things kind of came open.
What an honor.
I was just like, I'm going to chase this as quickly and as long as I can do it, And, just opened up a huge journey for me.
That's incredible. I'm having Chad on soon. We've been texting back and forth and just got to nail down at a time. But, that's amazing. That's so cool. Did you just tour with Further, or was it just a?
Yeah, no. So I was a touring member for 3 years. I did play. I did all the recording for when we did the Curtain Call live the last.
Oh, I love that.
John. Yep. So I did that. So I did Underoath before that. Blew up my knee. That was on the Changing of Times record going into the Only Chasing Safety. This was obviously before Spencer, so Dallas was still in the band. And we had written probably 3 or 4 songs on the Only Chasing Safety record when I moved on. And then about a year after that, I got a phone call. Further, I actually turned down twice. I turned him down the first time when Chris left and they had another singer before Jason. I
remember that.
Yep, they had asked me about playing then, and I was like, I just had a kid, so I was like, I'm not really interested in doing that now. And then they called again about a year later, and I was like, I can't pass it up a second time.
No, you can't.
And that ran its course. And then so when Dallas left Underoath, he started Maylene. So when he heard I was out Further, he called me about joining Maylene.
How long were you in Maylene?
3 years. So
Wow.
I was on the album cycle of 2, and then obviously helped write 3, and then toured off 3.
Did you write on? You mentioned Underoath on Chasing Safety. Did you write any of that stuff?
I mean, we all kind of, it was a collective group back then.
Yeah.
So obviously it was about a year before the Spencer thing. So a lot of things changed. I mean, like if you listen to some of the old demos, if you go onto YouTube, I mean, that was tracked over at me and my brother's old studio, like all that stuff from like the demos from all that stuff. So
You're in a music video.
with the change, well, When the Sun Still Sleeps. You know, I'm in that video as well. So,
dude, I have a funny little story about Underoath. I've told this on the podcast before, but I went to go see Branson and Appleseed Cast in Gainesville, and I was standing in line, and there was this guy behind me who had like these spikes on, or what, I don't remember, and he was like, we were just talking about music, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm starting a band," and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. What's it called?" And he's like, Underoath. And I was like, what? That's so cool.
Corey?
It was Corey. Yes. It was so,
man.
I know. And he lived, I guess when he passed away, he was living in Jacksonville. I wish I'd have got to know him at some point later on, but
I was friends with him until the very end. I know his wife and his family.
Man, that's so sad.
Very tragic situation.
Yes. But that's forever been etched to my mind. I don't know why. Other than the fact that, you know, obviously they wound up being massive after that, but it's like, it was just such a moment, like, I'll never forget, and no one else was around, so, I mean, I could be making it up, but it's the truth. Like, it literally was so cool and so, like, just a moment I'll never forget. But yeah,
I'm just proud of them, man. I was proud to see the success that they were able to, or still
absolutely.
able to.
Absolutely. And I liked them.
Cool. I just saw Chris about a week ago. So
that's so cool.
I went and saw Maylene play over here in Tampa on the tour, and Chris was there. So
I'm supposed to have Tim on soon. We've been texting too, but he's busy man. So, yeah. So anyway, amazing. That's so cool. I love that all three of you kind of have your own little worlds, but it's kind of coalesced into, you know, the current. So let's talk about the current, Riot for Romance. Let's talk about the beginning of that band and maybe where the band name came from and the direction of the music.
Yeah, sure. Again, I guess I'll jump in again. I think I really spearheaded the idea, but to talk about Riot, I think we got to take a couple quick detours. One is that Brett and I had a long musical history in Chicago with a band that was kind of hardcore punk called Rest. It morphed into the name Never Enough, and we were pretty strong in that region. And we did things like Chicago Stops at Warped Tour. We were good friends with a lot of musicians. So, like, I love that you've had the Mofo, some of the cats on from New York. Yeah, we were in the studio for their Ultraphonic Hiss and met the producer Keith Cleversley. So we did some work with him. You know, he's known for Flaming Lips and Hum and Forest, obviously. So we ran a course there, did Cornerstone, did all this stuff, right? And then we ended up breaking up and going on to other musical ventures here and there, everywhere. At that time, one of the first compilations, we would open for Branson all the time. So we knew those guys from 6 Feet Deep and then into Branson, got to be really close friends with them. We'd play a lot of shows with them as Never Enough. Matt Traxler was putting out the compilation Radio Waves and Gibberish and asked us
I remember that.
to participate, right? So it was under the name Rest, actually at the time before we changed our name. And ironically enough, Sleeping by the Riverside was on the same comp.
Yes.
So I didn't know Kelly then, and neither did Brett. But, you know, it's kind of cool to look back and go, this was kind of a meant to be friendship, even back then, just our intersections. We were friends with the guys from Strong Arm. He knew Steve Kleiseth really well.
Yeah.
And through different stuff, and then into Strong Arm, right? And your other ways of knowing all of them, right? So all this stuff is like in parallel. And then you kind of just jump forward, and I was the roommate for Steve Kleiseth, actually, in Fort Lauderdale for Pompano Beach, to be more correct.
Yeah.
That crew. Ask Chad when you speak with him about the Pompano crew.
Okay.
So one day, you know, obviously Brett and I have been best friends for, he mentioned, ever, since we were 12, 13. Well, I don't know. I've actually known Kelly it's over 15 years, almost 20. Steve Klyseth introduced us while I was rooming with Steve, and we just clicked. And we did some projects together on a band that I started in Fort Lauderdale, and then even when I moved into Denver, Kelly would record and co-write, and we just were really close as friends more than anything. So for Riot, it was during the pandemic, which I've come now to find that a lot of us musicians started doing projects during. You started losing your mind
absolutely.
during lockdown, right? Well, as you are well aware, Jeremy, we are part of a bit of a cult on Facebook with Starflower 59, right? That's kind of how you and I actually interacted probably a little before even meeting, right? On the Starflyer group on Facebook. And it was really thriving, I think, at that time. It still is, but really we were all chatting a lot. And Matt Schwartz from Pacifico and Pacifier Records was putting out a compilation.
Oh, yeah.
Not a compilation, but a cover album, right, of Starflyer, a collection of Starflyer songs. And it was open to the group first to submit. So I thought, I've always wanted to do a cover of, like, The Dungeon off
That's
Starflyer.
my favorite Starflyer song.
I'm so glad. I mean, me too, right? So I called Brett. I said, dude, I want to be on this. I want to be on this cover album. I want to write a cover of The Dungeon. Are you in? And he's like, dude, yeah, let's do it. Huh. All right. Well, maybe we'll program drums. I don't really know, but my boy Kelly, they had met at my wedding. But other than that, I think hadn't really known each other too well. And called him to say, hey, man, do you mind doing some mixing and mastering? He's like, dude, I play drums, man. You're my homie.
Yeah, because I heard the AI drums that they were using, and I was like, nope, this thing don't happen.
Not today, Satan!
I can mix and master this as long as it's not AI drums.
Wow. Love that.
But it was just a perfect time where everything was aligned. Because Kelly, for a lot of years, in all these bands he's referenced, had been playing guitar, right? He started as Sleeping by the Riverside on drums, but eventually morphed into this phenomenal guitar player. And I mean, dude, to be able to play further stuff, the stuff that Josh writes and Further Seems Forever,
it's absurd.
Yeah, and so for him to work with that crew and is pretty phenomenal. Derek, right? Just that they're such phenomenal musicians. So I knew his chops were there. I didn't realize he wanted to do drums. I'm like, are you kidding me? Hell yeah. Dude, let's do this. This is my closest, bestest. I have a lot of acquaintances, but they're my brothers. We talked all the time. It's I don't even have too many friends in Denver. So sorry, Denver friends who are possibly listening. But really, these two in other states are my closest, right? So that's how it started. And here we are. We did the cover of The Dungeon, and we're like, damn, we like how this turned out, right?
Yeah.
Actually, Brett did the main design work for that cover release. And we were going to be on the vinyl, but everything was getting delayed, the process, and we started writing and on the moniker, on the name Riot for Romance. And I know you asked about that name, so I'll mention that too, but just the starting of the band, we just started writing originals. And we were doing it all remotely because it was a lockdown. So each of us from each state were tracking and using the cloud and figuring out how to make it work. But The Dungeon, for us at least, we were really happy with how that came out, right? It was an opportunity for us to reinvent an interpretation of a song we loved and try to keep the essence of the original while pushing it to a new place that's us, right? That it, in fact, I would say most people, unless they're, it's a deep cut, right? If you're not a Starflyer fan, people just think it's one of our tunes. So that's a great honor to say, okay, we paid homage, but it still falls in line with how we write. So we were writing all these originals, and I couldn't wait. I didn't want to wait. I was like, we're not waiting, Matt. You can't be on the vinyl then. I don't care. We're going to put this out anyway. Put us on the digital release. And that's how we formed.
Oh, cool.
And then the name, actually, I've always been a fan of No Knife, the band No Knife.
Oh, love No Knife.
Yeah. And they had an album and a song called Riot for Romance.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. The alliteration, Riot for Romance, it just rolls so well, and it brings a lot of different thoughts to me as far as what it, conjures, right? So I thought there was really no other reason than I really like the way this sounds, and I really like No Knife, and we don't necessarily sound like No Knife, but let's just call it this. And
that's cool.
I think in the beginning we didn't know where this would go. It was just kind of a name to put on the project for the dungeon, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, and if I'm being honest, I had no idea. I mean, don't shoot me or anything what I'm about to say. I didn't even know who No Knife was.
Oh my!
I heard the name.
Yeah, sure, but
it's hard. It's hard for me because sometimes, there's so much music out there.
Oh, I know.
And I'm just not one that's always delving into stuff because I'm usually working on a project. So my ears are the last thing I want to do is listen to music anymore.
Oh,
and so sometimes but when this all started, I think I wasn't expecting it to do anything.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, cool. Well, we'll write some songs during the pandemic, have a little fun with this. And then we start to finish the songs, and then Jason's like, hey, I'm going to send this out to a few people. Let's just, and then, hey, we have some interest. I was like, what? What do you mean we have interest? This is not supposed to be taken seriously. And it just started morphing into more and more of the idea of doing music. I stopped performing, almost 10 years ago. Just my health got to a place where it just wasn't making sense to do this. And so, when it all kind of came to fruition, I was like, well, drums is going to get me motivated to do something. Cause like I said, that's my only regret in life, in the sake of, and it's not even like an actual regret, is I wish I would have pursued drums just a little more from a professional standpoint. And now I get to do that now, being a little older. It has helped kind of push that stuff to the forefront, which has been fun. So it's been awesome though. So super excited to see this functionality and how it's worked over the last few years.
That's cool, man. That's really awesome. Let's talk about you mentioned interest, so let's talk about the interest, and then let's go into the Riot for Romance EP that you put out a couple years ago. Maybe let's talk about that record and kind of looking back on it and what inspired that EP.
Do you want to take a stab at any? Okay, no, I can run with it.
I'll give my version.
He gave me a funny look for those who are not seeing this,
Give him funny looks.
You do give me funny looks all the time.
No, I would say, like Jason mentioned, we've known, I believe collectively Kelly too, but definitely Jason and I have known Matt Traxler for years, and
love
he's
Matt.
A sweetheart. Yeah, amazing dude. I don't know anyone that when you mention that name doesn't immediately go, what a great guy, just a lovely human being. He definitely is. I think Jason kind of kept in touch with him maybe the most. And then I think, we would kind of send things to him for his feedback. He was always pretty open, honest guy. And it wasn't necessarily that he immediately was like, yep, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I think he was kind of interested and was just like, well, keep me apprised of your progress, that kind of, we had, I know Jason had kind of struck up a friendship with Rob from Friend Club Records.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some interest there. And I remember, I think it was Furnace Fest 2021, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Jason and I decided to go. I think Kelly, you met us up there too. Yeah. Oh, we hung out. We had completed like a 3-song demo cassette. We were kind of passing out to some folks, just to kind of get, drum up some interest. Kind of trying to reference our sort of, cornerstone guerrilla marketing days, but also, being smart about it, trying to network. And I believe Jason and Rob really connected there.
Yeah.
And Rob expressed interest, but then kind of, I guess Rob and Matt Traxler had known each other and were kind of working on some things, and there was a suggestion that maybe those guys would want to co-release something for us. And so I think the timing might be a little bit fuzzy here, but I think with that kind of knowledge, we, like I said, we had finished 3 songs. We were in the process of doing, I think, 3 or 4 more, and quickly wrap those up. And it was kind of funny because you hear nowadays a lot of people are like, oh, well, if you're going to put out a record, especially on vinyl, you need to do this thing in a year in advance, blah, 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 blah. But we decided, let's do cassette. Let's do lathe cut vinyl. And I just remember feeling that all of a sudden we were sort of hitting the ground running. Like, okay, we're gonna put out a record. Like I think finished mixing it maybe in November or December of the previous year, and all of a sudden I was like, all right, this thing's coming out on February 14th, which was awesomely appropriate for the name Riot for Romance.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, one thing, I'm shocked Jason didn't mention this, but we actually kind of got the No Knife, the band's blessing on using that name.
Really?
Yeah.
Not even kind of, like, full on. Somebody in the Friend Club record crew, you know, one of the I don't know, the community, I'll put it, within that community, actually, like, when it was announced we were releasing with Friend Club and Steadfast on socials, on Instagram, they tagged No Knife. What do you think about this? And then they responded, that's awesome. Go get them. And then we had a conversation back and forth a little bit where they started giving some context around the name Riot for Romance. It came from this book. Haven't really researched all of that, but how they wrote the song and why, and then It was a pretty cool interaction on socials. But yeah, they were full on. Go use it, and I don't know. Like they gave the sign of the cross. They said, "May the force be with you," whatever it was. You know?
That's awesome, man. Well, yeah, let's talk about the record. Like I said, what inspired the EP, I should say. What inspired it, and looking back on it, how you feel about it. I know it's been a couple years.
Yeah. I guess I'll just kind of continue. Kind of similar to Kelly. I feel like a lot of us do this, but like we kind of like you're asking us to like talk in a forward kind of momentum, but I'm gonna take a step back a little bit too, real quick. Kelly had kind of mentioned that he hadn't performed for at least 10 years. I hadn't performed for 15 years. The last thing I had done, I kind of failed to mention this before. The last thing I had done is I played in a band in Nashville, Tennessee, as I was kind of gradually making my way to Atlanta. I played in a band in Nashville, Tennessee called the Sincerity Guild. And that, I think, is relevant to your audience because I wound up in that band because for a brief time I was got really friendly with Aaron Marsh from Copeland.
Oh, nice.
And at the time, Copeland had a fill-in drummer by the name of Aaron Ford. Aaron Ford and I met on this message board called Decapolis.
Yeah, I remember that.
He's like, "Oh, you're in that band Never Enough. That's cool. That's a really great band. You know, you should, you know, if you're going to Cornerstone, we should hang out." So Aaron Ford and I hung out. We hit it off. And just really briefly, he had a band on the side other than doing drums for Copeland. He had a band he had put together, very instrumental, kind of post-rock kind of thing, very like DC punk influenced. He's like, "Hey, I need a bass player for a tour. Like, would you want to like, you know, do that?" I did that. Did the tour, came back after the tour. He's like, "Do you want to stick around and do some recording?" I'm totally giving you the Cliff Notes version, but it's relevant to the Riot for Romance conversation. "Do you want to do some recording with us?" "Yeah, man, I'd love to do some recording." That wound up turning into, "Do you want to move to Nashville and be our bass player?" And I was like,
"Wow,
sure." And it was cool because it kind of, I mentioned earlier, outsider music. It led me down this path of like things that weren't so mainstream. You know, we were an instrumental 3-piece. And I think at the time, the only band I knew like that was Unwet Sailor, which, you know, love those guys. Yeah. Love that band. Aaron introduced me to things like Don Caballero.
Yeah, great band.
They have like a lot of post, like Mogwai, like kind of, just kind of a lot of touch and go records, like Horsestick Records kind of thing. And we wound up, this is kind of my one humble brag, which like shortly after that, my music career kind of ended, but we wound up mixing our record with Bob Weston. Like,
wow, that's so cool.
That was kind of my moment where I was like, okay, I've arrived, you know, I've done this, I'm done with music. So getting back to Riot for Romance, I had kind of put music away for at least 15 years to, like I mentioned, like I just quit everything, went back to school, got married, got my design degree, got divorced, but just like never picked music back up. So when this kind of project came into our lap, it was kind of like, well, I haven't played music in 15 years, and I'm not really sure what kind of music I would want to play. And it took my best friend of almost 30 years calling me up and saying like, "Hey, I want to do this Starflare cover." And so speaking about Riot for Romance and how the first EP came together, I think initially Jason and I kind of thought we were going to make this shoegaze record. like straight up like shoegaze, like very like influenced by Starflyer 59 Silver record, My Bloody Valentine, Slow Dive, et cetera. But Jason and I also like back in high school we bonded over bands like Quicksand, Jawbox, stuff like that, And then once Kelly kind of came on board and was like, I want to do drums, we knew Kelly's pedigree too, and then I distinctly remember one point Jason kind of saying, hey, I'm sorry, I think you really wanted to make a shoegaze record, but right now this isn't really sounding very shoegaze. And I kind of had this moment where I was like, you know what though, that's super cool though.
It's
like I would rather have something that like maybe like someone who loves all those shoegaze bands I mentioned would go, I can hear this, but then someone who liked Further Seems Forever, or
Quicksand
kind of comes to mind.
Sunny Day, yeah.
We've had a couple people to like Circa Survive a little bit, but there's these things that I think kind of like post-punk becomes a touch point, shoegaze a touch point, hardcore, and like Kelly mentioned, we're all just like music lovers, like
totally.
Kelly and I bond sometimes over like things like Tears for Fears, like
I love Tears for Fears.
Yeah, like such a great band, and so I think speaking of the EP, like the first EP, we're kind of, as we'll talk about later, we're working on future releases, but I think the first EP was kind of, it might lean a little like sort of like heavy, kind of like post-hardcore-ish, but I think you can still hear a lot of these influences. There's one track on the record that was kind of like an idea I brought to the band, and it's very kind of like dreamy, like instrumental. Yeah. That's kind of like the outlier. I think the magic happens when like all three of us kind of are able to blend our influences together in a way that just becomes magic. And I think so that's kind of that record. As we get into like future releases, I think we're sort of pushing each other further in disparate directions. But on that first EP, I'll kind of wrap up and kind of gain focus back here. I think the first EP kind of proved to us that the formula was working and made us think like, let's keep going. Yeah. We like Kelly said, we made those songs. We thought we were just going to like, maybe put out a release. All of a sudden we had label interest. And then even further from that, like a couple months, 6 months after, putting out the EP or whatever, we started talking about, okay, well, do we want to play these songs live?
Yeah, let's tour.
And we were able to do that. And I think
that's how we met you, man.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Mr. ENC, we did a little mini run. I'll just say before I didn't mean to pull us that direction. Just the last thought on my end. I don't know if you have anything to add for that EP, but my mindset for the EP wasn't very like, it was more from just riffs and the heart and just like throwing stuff out there because we didn't really have an end goal in mind early on because we had such challenging. Every band has a point in their life or a musician who's been in bands like, there were some blowouts here. There were some arguments. And we didn't want that. If music's not fun, we all had and have other gigs that we do to earn a living, right? For our families or our own, lifestyle. So immediately we kind of came up with this like unofficial mission statement. If it ain't fun, we done. And, we've really held to that. We don't have too many tense moments, but when we have, it's just like, okay, gut check everyone. Is this fun? Because if it ain't fun, we need to change trajectory. We're not going to push we're not going to push any ideas or ideology or any kind of like insistence on anything that is going to force another member to be like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. And there are times where you aren't going to enjoy stuff. So it's so good to have that like understanding, like, hey, I think each of us at some point have said, guys, I'm not having a lot of fun at the moment. Can we reassess? and that's been really healthy for us. So, I just wanted to mention that. And also a couple other fun facts as we kind of fell into our roles, and the formula that Brett mentioned. We all contribute in different ways. So it's not just Brett only contributes bass. There's some guitar stuff he's contributed. Kelly is the main writer for any harmonies you hear, and that comes, I think, from your California Dreamin' Beach Boys influence.
Yeah, it really does.
Seriously.
Vocal melodies. Well, having worked with like James Wisner and stuff,
Yeah.
and he was always a really big vocal guy. I always, like, when I started learning how to sing when I was younger, just the abilities to be able to harmonize, and obviously with my mom and my grandfather, that whole Southern gospel area, you're learning how to sing different harmonies. So I wanted to like really challenge the guys in the sake of like, hey, like, there's one element to this that we know that we can do.
Yeah.
What if we were to actually push this a little further?
Yeah.
And not to say not settle, but try to, because I mean, music for me, and it, if I'm being honest, when we were first talking about doing this, I mean, I remember having a conversation with my wife, because I'm like when I left doing music, it ruined part of the ability to play music, because music had become a business. So everything that we were doing was whether or not it was going to be in the sake for the business. And, you start to lose sight of your friendships and what really matters about playing this. And so I had to come to the guys. I was like, guys, listen, I want to do this, but it has to be at a place, because I don't want to lose that joy that I did for a few years.
Absolutely.
And so it was ultimately why I stopped playing music, because I'm like, I allowed certain aspects to rob the joy of playing music. And this was that first time that I started feeling, oh, wow, this is it's okay to be happy about performing again. It's okay to be happy and anxious about some of these things. And then with me and Jason having worked before on his other project, there was what always comes great in a band setting is when the person that you're doing stuff with, you trust.
Yeah.
There may not always be, everybody seeing the right direction, but that everyone has everyone's best intentions.
Absolutely.
And that really started cultivating in the writing process where, hey, one person may hear it one way, someone hears it another way, and then we try to iron out which ways work within those settings and finding a healthy balance. And it was one of the more, if I'm being honest, it was probably one of the more constructive writing processes that I've been a part of. And I've been a part of a lot of writing processes. And so it really came natural. And that's what I knew that we were onto something good, is that it wasn't a struggle anymore.
That's cool. I love that. That's awesome. That's a lot of insight, on all three of your viewpoints. And it's cool. It's a great EP. Love it. Yeah, absolutely, you should be. And the art, we're down to the artwork. It looks fantastic. Sounds good. So that's exciting. Let's talk about the next EP you just put out recently, Learning to Unburden Myself, Step 1, and maybe kind of the future with that as well.
So, we knew we'd been playing shows and loving that, right? The performance aspect of it was a blast. And we started writing these songs, almost immediately after the first EP. But I think making sure we were balanced, if it ain't fun, we done, having lives outside of music, and then being in 3 different states elongated the writing process, which we were fine and comfortable with. The labels aren't always fine and comfortable with it, but like with Matt, for example, Steadfast Records has been the mainstay for the band throughout. It's kind of the common theme. They've been a part of every release, and they will continue to be a part of releases as we go forward, at least for the foreseeable future. And talking to Matt just a couple days ago. So Matt, you're on the hook.
Love Matt.
And so
Can't back out now,
buddy. It's been documented and is out there. And so he had been a great advocate. Some really cool stuff. We've had some great reviews. We were a part of the big Takeover magazine's top 200 for the critic and writer Jack Rabbit. For those who don't know, he started the print zine in the 70s. He's a pretty well-regarded music critic in the punk rock, shoegaze, alternative, whatever scene, right? So he had put out Matt, unbeknownst to us, had sent our EP out. He put a real favorable review in print for us. And so we kind of knew, okay, there's something here, like Kelly said. So in this writing, we decided to approach, in this new era of music, the concept of, okay, right now, for those who are music lovers and musicians, you probably know, streaming is a pretty large method of listening and consuming music. And so the idea is you put out you should put out a single all the time.
Yeah.
Just pushing out music constantly. But we really love the art behind physical media as well. So we decided to skin the two. We recorded our cover of Karma Police about a little over a year ago. And that got some really great press. It got us, essentially, that single got us verified as a public interest on Instagram. It got us an Earmilk review. Idiotech did a review. It was popping. So we're like, okay, this is cool. So we started looking at the songs we were writing and moving forward, and we came up with this concept of learning to unburden yourself. And the theme being, even back a year ago, of just taking a look at how we grow as people and our worldview changes, and we have to unburden a lot of the things we've learned and almost unlearn them. I think it's just human nature, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's thematically what we decided to work with. All the songs are thematically around that. And then we thought, okay, let's release an EP, call it Step 1, with only 4 songs. We're going to release a second EP. That's why we're in the studio today to wrap up some songs we had been working on for Step 2, Learning to Unburden Myself, Step 2. And then ultimately, the third phase, it's slated for a fall release of a full LP. The plan today is to release those 8 songs, the 2 EPs together, and then 2 unreleased songs, either new, remix. We got to figure all that stuff out still. But that will come out as a full LP and vinyl in the fall. So this process of putting things out was a blast. We took the same approach, but let me rephrase this. We built on the approach we did from the first EP, because that was a little willy-nilly and fun and organic. So we took all the best elements of that organic formula that worked well, how we complement each other. Like Kelly also does a lot of the lead guitars on all of the songs to bring a contrast to my guitar playing. Yeah. And it's just so all these elements, right? So let's build on that. And then we all took a much more took an approach, a music theory approach. So there's a little bit more thought that's gone into this, and I've been really happy with the results so far. We actually did a short mini tour in support of the EP that released April 5th. And we started out here in St. Pete, had an awesome time with some great bands who brought local presence. Moved on to Birmingham, and we played Work Play, that's now owned by some of the Furnace Fest owners and folks. And we played in support of Unwed Sailor in May. It was
so cool. Love those
great
guys.
time, so fun. Turned around, went to Atlanta, and played a Live Nation event at Aisle 5 with some great bands, including Pacifico.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then we rounded off in Nashville, playing the oldest bar in Nashville that does music.
I have a fun story about that venue, if I can interject.
Please interject that.
Too late now.
Tell them the venue.
So
what's the venue called?
Springwater. We played Springwater in Nashville, Tennessee, and almost 20 years to the date, I had played there. I want to say 20 years. Yeah, almost 20 years to the date. I had played there previously with the band I was talking about, Nashville Sincerity Guild. But fun fact, we played with a band. Jeremy, you probably know this band, Saxon Shore.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's Father John. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, the drummer of that band was one Josh Tillman, who everyone
so cool.
So, anyway,
such a great band.
Fun little music history for us.
Yeah, man. And then so we rounded that off. That was a great set. And then from that, we've just been pushing the marketing and made our pitches. And just in the last 20 days, we discovered that Karma Police was added to the Spotify editorial playlist called Alt Now. And it features like alternative music that they consider for today's day and age. I'm fine with that loose title, but 21 Pilots, Hozier, Imagine Dragons, a ton of just very successful bands for today are on that. And then we also had one of our originals, This Way Comes Something Wicked, put on another Spotify editorial playlist called This Is Alt Good, or This Is Alt Now. I'm going to chop that up. But anyway, yeah, so here we are, right? And now we're in the studio wrapping up another 4 songs. We've got 1 mixed already done, and just going to round out the 3 others, and we're on our way.
That's exciting, guys. I love that. I love hearing that, and really excited for the future for you guys. And if you guys had the magic 8 ball, and you can individually tell me kind of what does the future look like for you?
I mean, continually making music and having fun doing it. I don't have a grand gesture plan for me. It's more or less just take it as far as we can go. If that's just, recording, having fun, doing these little small, mini tours, I'm completely content with that. I said I'm a pretty easygoing person, so for me it's all great. So as long as we continue to be able to make music that we like and people still seem to want to be interested in it, I'm good with that.
That's awesome.
Gosh, I think for me, kind of similar lines to Kelly. One thing I've really enjoyed about the writing of this EP is I feel like the first EP was a lot of things kind of started with Jason, and we all contributed. And I think on this, out of the 8 songs total so far, a couple ideas have come from Kelly. And I for the first time ever, I submitted fully formed demos to the band, which I had never done. I still think in a lot of ways I'm thankful for these guys to really make my ideas make sense. So I think for me, the future would be to kind of just to continue to grow as a musician, which is funny because, having put it aside for 16 years, the really great thing about this band is once I had kind of joined this band, it was almost kind of like the whole analogy of you always remember how to ride a bike or kind of
totally.
muscle memory. I found myself kind of being a better player and musician than I'd ever been. And so it's kind of exciting to even at as I'm getting up there in years, still being able to progress in that nature and just kind of looking at. So I think for me, I'm looking at the future a little bit more philosophically in terms of you're never too old or it's never too late to just kind of pursue a passion and live life accordingly. I'd say, if these guys want to keep going as a unit, I'm definitely open to that. I think I'm kind of I'm probably the most scatterbrained out of the 3 of us, and it's
if you can't tell,
if you couldn't tell. But I guess the point of that is sometimes I'll get really yeah, man, music, Riot for Romance, that's all that's everything, all my energy is going into that, and then I'll kind of go, I kind of want to take some time and make a little bit of fine art or do this or do that. So I think the future for me is to just
keep having fun.
Keep having fun. Most importantly, have a great relationship with these guys, whatever we decide to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's awesome.
I think that's right in line with me, too. We're all, that's the beauty of it. We're best friends. We do this out of trust, as Kelly said, for each other, the joy of it, the love of it. And we're just along for the ride. I'm probably, in some regard, at least with the music process, the most hippie. I let the music speak to me, and we just kind of roll with it, right?
Yeah.
And then whatever that outcome is, I work hard. We all work hard to promote what we love. So next steps for us is, maybe another little, hoping for a little mini tour maybe this fall with a name or some names that some of your listeners may know, but we don't have it solidified yet, so can't talk about it, but just keep your ears open, and we'll just continue having fun together, and hope you all join us for that fun when we're around you.
We're planning for the fall, so keep your ears out.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome, guys. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really have enjoyed this conversation. It's cool to, hear different perspectives, and having known you guys for a little bit, it's cool to kind of, go a little further and kind of see where you guys came from. So I really appreciate it. I'm really honored that you guys would take time to hang out with me.
You just stole my line. I was going to say we're really to be on. We love your podcast. We love what you're doing. It brings not just great nostalgia, but also taps into why all of us love music. We're as much fans as we are musicians, right? So we appreciate you, Jeremy. Thank you for what you do for the community, and thank you for having us.
Well, thank you. That's really kind. And I'm going to say, oh, hush. I'm just kidding.
Oh, hush.
All right, guys, man. We will talk soon, and I hope to see you guys in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for having us on.
All right. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in again and again. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the likes, the subscribes, the messages, all that stuff. I really, really appreciate it. If you'd like to add me on Instagram and Facebook at The Rumors Are True Cast. I do have merch now. If that's something you're interested in, there is a link on the Instagram and Facebook pages. Just follow that if that's something you are interested in. Had a logo designed by John Neeson III. Really psyched on it. So thank you again for listening, folks. Thank you to the band Riot for Romance. Jason, Brett, and Kelly, thank you so much for your time. Really cool conversation. Really excited for the future of your band. So thank you again. Got some incredible artists on the horizon, guys, and you know it. Nostalgia is still a hell of a drug.